All right, everybody. Great to see you today. Today, we are going to bring you one of my good friends and somebody that I've had the opportunity to work with myself and benefit from, Mr. Paul Boehnke. Paul Boehnke is a life coach. He's an International Coach Federation certified coach. He's also an Energy Leadership Index Master Practitioner. He trained at the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching, where he now helps to train current students. He specializes in helping people with life purpose and working with the inner critic. His book, Thoughts on Demand, about helping people turn negative self-talk into unstoppable confidence, will be coming out soon. So I'm personally very excited to read that. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks so much, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, I'm excited to ask you some questions and to share a little bit more about what I already have the benefit of knowing about you with some of our clients at Performance Running and 3Click Fitness. So to start with, I think this is a question that probably everybody has going into this conversation. What is a life coach and why do people hire one?
Yeah, pretty basic questions and good ones to ask. So, well, coaching really is a proven process for helping people improve their lives. You know, when there's something that we want, but can't just quite seem to make come true, there's something else that's blocking the way. And coaching is about ferreting out what those blocks are and discovering ways to sort of step over them. Or here's another way to think about it. You could be thinking, well, why should I pay to have a coach when, gee, I've got pretty good family and friends to talk to? Well, I will ask you, how many have someone in your life who really listens to you without judgment, without trying to fix you, and without putting their own agenda into the conversation? That's really what coaching is. That's sort of what I do. That's what makes it different from a conversation with a friend. People seek out a life coach to resolve and improve a whole vast array of issues in their lives. They may be experiencing, a lack of confidence or imposter syndrome, or even just procrastination. Sometimes they may be just settling for less than what they really want, or they may be looking for more purpose and meaning in their life. Sometimes they might just sort of feel weighed down by constant fear or guilt or worry, something that's just really holding them back. But in any case, they have a desire to improve their relationships, their productivity, their financial situation, even work-life balance, health, spiritual connection. Basically, they're tired of living life the way that they currently are, but they're having trouble moving past what feel like invisible blocks. And there's a desire to change something, but they're having difficulty achieving that change on their own. Now, most of the people who come to me, they're seeking either more meaning and purpose in their lives, or they come because they're just tired of all the negative self-talk that's going on in their head. And they recognize that all that talk has just too much influence on their lives. And they want to really get out from under its messages. That's sort of what coaching is about.
Got it. Yeah, I think that is so powerful and something that I've had the benefit of experiencing in my work with you. That's actually helped me in my running. I'm ultra marathon runner, as most of you know, and that for me has been awesome game changer. Can you tell me a little bit about how and why you decided to become a coach? Because this hasn't been your career all along. You made a concerted effort to switch. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's true. Thanks for that question. Yeah, there are really sort of basically two parts to this story. As you mentioned, I did spend many years as a musician before I became a coach. And being an artist is really about much more than simply mastering the tools of your art. It's really about mastering yourself, uncovering your own hidden fears, motivations, habits, so that those things don't get in the way of creative expression. And that was, frankly, one of the most satisfying parts of being an artist to me. It was also one of the most satisfying parts of teaching, helping my students uncover their own hidden fears, motivations, and habits. And the second part of the story is that, well, as a performer, I needed to train my mind, my body, and my emotions, basically so that they worked together in order that I could play music well. And when they all had to do their part on cue, I needed to develop certain skills to make that happen. And so that's frankly what I got good at, getting my brain, my body, and my emotions to do what I needed them to do when I needed them to do it. And then a little later in life, I realized that there were still these messages in my head that kept arguing for all my limitations. They kept telling me all the things that I couldn't be doing. And, eventually I decided that maybe if I could use those same mind training skills I'd learned as a performer, maybe I could use that to reprogram those negative thoughts in my head. And when I could see that that worked, man, well, then I knew I had the power to not only change my life, but the lives of others as well. And so that's really when I decided to become a coach.
Oh, what a cool story, and what a cool journey that you've kind of organically found yourself using some of these skills and learning some of these skills for your former career, and ultimately found a passion for helping others do the same. I mean, what a great way to kind of move from experience. So we all know that voice in our head that causes so much grief, but I'm curious to know how it shows up, shall we say, outside of our head, in our life in general. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it does show up in so many, many different ways. Here's a small list: hesitation, confusion, second guessing, criticizing, judgment, fear, shyness, bravado, needing outside validation. Sometimes it shows up as inflexibility, or maybe being overly rational or overly emotional. It can show up in impatience and constant apologizing and denial. This list can go on almost forever. Those little messages in our head hide behind so many different behaviors. But at the root of virtually all of those messages, all of those self-doubts that we have, is the feeling that we're just not quite good enough in one way or another. This negative self-talk, it tends to focus on our sense of self-worth. It's just that it shows up in an amazingly wide range of ways.
Wow, very interesting. And so it's a lot of different things here, a lot of different places where this kind of voice in our head can play a huge influence. That's interesting. I think a lot of times we don't really realize how many places it shows up until we start to think about what you just said on that list. I mean, it's really incredible. So obviously the next question is like, what are the basic steps to reprogramming that voice that's inside our heads? That's what we want to do, right?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And really the root of almost all the work that I do as a coach. There are really sort of four main phases to this process. And the first one is simply to recognize that these thoughts that we have, these habitual thoughts that keep going on in our mind over and over and over, are just thoughts. They are not who we are. We begin to realize that these thoughts and who we understand ourselves to be are two separate things. And that creates a little bit of distance between us, who we know ourselves to be, and those thoughts. That's the first phase. The second phase is to sort of uncover what the lies are that those negative thoughts have been telling us. They're always based on lies. And once we get really to the bottom, we sort of dig around and figure out what is really going on underneath there, we realize that these negative self-talk patterns are not only habitual thoughts, but they're not even true. And so that realization creates even more separation between who we know ourselves to be and those thoughts. Now, the third phase is to create a new message that you want to put into that space that we just created. Because if we don't consciously create something that we want to put into that vacuum that we created, the old thoughts will find their way back in, just out of habit. It would be the most natural thing. But if we can consciously create a thought that we want to be thinking that would support us, that really gets us moving in the right direction. Now, basically, this is creating affirmations. And of course, some people love affirmations and some people think, oh, they're just a waste of time. They never work. And when I hear that they're not working for people, I'm usually thinking that what is going on for them is that the affirmation they are using, whether it's a good one or not, may not be the right one for them. We each have our, shall we say, custom created issues, custom created thoughts. And if we're going to replace them, we need our own custom created affirmations to go along with that. So the work that I do really tries to get to the bottom of the lies and the sense of self-worth that gets questioned by all of this, to create a new message that is the right one for each client. And then once you've got that message, the fourth phase is simply to practice it. We need to turn it into a habit. And the interesting thing about a belief is that a belief is really just a thought that we keep thinking. Belief and truth, they're two totally different topics. They sort of have nothing to do with each other. So if we want to create a belief, all we have to do is keep thinking this thought. And that's where this fourth phase of practicing comes in, whether it's like practicing a musical instrument or practicing running or practicing your golf swing or practicing anything. We just have to make a conscious choice to do it over and over and over. And that then becomes our new habit. That is really the first, or the four phases to reprogramming that voice.
Yeah, this is a process that we had the opportunity to work on a little bit. And this is something I still to this day use in my running. So that's fun that you mentioned that. This is it is a lot like practicing anything else. And one of the things that I work with as a running coach is kind of working with people to reprogram movement patterns. We think about the nervous system and reprogramming these movement patterns, and practice is what reprograms these. And it's interesting that what you're working with up here is really just reprogramming patterns, much like we do when I'm coaching runners, but it's the patterns up here. It's interesting that the way that you do that is, in a lot of ways, mirrors the way that you do it in the physical realm. It's interesting.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to interrupt you there for a second, just because of what you mentioned. The whole story that I take my clients through is not only creating a new message and a new thought to have, but it's also making a thought that, first of all, makes your heart sing, that feels emotionally really powerful, because that will strengthen the power of that thought when you feel really great about it. And then, since we've got our mind and our emotions involved, as you suggested, let's get our bodies involved too. And so I encourage people to find some sort of motion, some sort of physical action that supports the thought and that emotion. Frankly, it can literally be anything, but something that you can do with your body and practice all three of those things together. And then that is unbelievably powerful and sustainable. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought this was just a great little connection between the kinds of work that you and I both do.
Yeah, well, as we always do, we could go down that rabbit hole for a whole other hour, Paul, but we'll continue on. We're both kind of nerds in our own realms. So how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to learn more about your work, or maybe even look into working with you as their life coach?
Well, I suppose the best way to get a hold of me is just to go to paulboehnke.com. There's actually lots of information there, even plenty of resources to begin your journey on your own. But if and when you are ready to really tame that critical voice in your head, just click on the links that say request a free consultation. You can sign up for that right then and there. And when we get together, we will talk about sort of what's going on for you and how I might be able to help. There is no cost and there's no obligation for this consultation. It's just an opportunity for us to get to know each other and for you to begin taking that first step into a new life.
And I really hope that our listeners here take advantage of that, because as I know from experience, even a consultation with you is incredibly valuable and a great place to start your journey. So thank you so much, Paul, for being on with us today. And like we said, check Paul out at his website, paulboehnke.com. We'll include that in the notes at the end, and request that free consult. Have a great day, Paul.
You too, Aaron. Thank you.